Hello, this is David D. Hilster. I am a critical thinker, dissident, scientist, and if you are not science woke, then this is the place for you. There are literally thousands and thousands of scientists from around the world who've been working for decades outside the mainstream, who've identified problems, fixed those problems, and who are proposing new theories and models. You won't find anything like this on the internet, so make sure you go down below, click on that little subscribe button and the bell next to it, and you'll be alerted to when our next video drops. Well, I'll tell you, I am with one of the people I talk about most, and I actually am claiming, folks, that I have brought lots of new subscribers to his YouTube channel, which is called The Machian. I know when I started my channel, I was looking at those people I admire that had channels. Of course, his productions are like, he's got his old graphics and all that stuff. But at the time I saw it, I think he only had about 380 some now. He's almost to 1,000. I want to take entire credit for them. It's not him at all. It's just me. And of course, I'm lying about all this. But I'm with one of the great critical thinkers today, Dr. Alexander Unzicker. He's a physicist, author, and science writer. Welcome, Alexander.
Hi, David. Great
Yeah,
to see you again. Hi.
yeah. Hey, and of course, as you know, we're going to be talking more about. I have a video. Have you haven't seen it? Just look above. I'm pointing to above right there. You're going to see. Go to that link that I'm pointing to above of me right there, and that will get you to an interview that I just did with him, Alexander, on his Einstein lost keys. Key. I always say keys, but there's actually more than one key, in my opinion. But and it's not only Einstein. It is a great read. It's got things that you're not going to find anywhere else, and that's why you tune in this channel. But right now, I'm going to focus on two books that I always tell you: the Higgs Fake. That's one that I think every scientist needs to read. Everybody, because we're more inundated by the particle physics and the world around us that tells us, all particle physics is just hunky dory, and they keep finding and building bigger colliders and stuff and all that. And you wonder, is this stuff really true? Read the book. Nice and short, and it is very colloquial, so you don't have to worry. There's not a whole lot of equations. And of course, there's another one here, Bankrupting Physics with Alexander, and another author, Sheila Jones. And those are both worth looking into. And I have questions for you today, Dr. Alexander. And we're going to have a couple of sessions. But this one, I'm going to try to answer some questions I've had all along. Um, One of the things when I've read your book, and I wish I could tell you which book it was because I've read through them in the last month a couple
Oh,
of
let's see if
times.
I remember.
So if you don't remember, that doesn't matter. We'll get off the hook because I do remember sort of not being shocked, but being shocked reading, and that was I was reading along and you're talking, and it may have been the Higgs fake, that people are not necessarily physicists in general are not in the camp of the theoretical physicists as much as people think. I think the idea that is it the case, one of my contentions is, and I have a contention about scientists and people who love science, engineers, people who work at NASA or at SpaceX. I have this contention that there is the vast majority of people when they read about history eraser uh, uh, quantum mechanics, and they read about 11 dimensions, and they read about the string theory, and they read about the Higgs boson, and they read about, upness and downness and strangeness and isospin. They're thinking to themselves inside, hey, wake me up when there's something real. I'm not buying this. What is your knowledge? Because one of the things we don't have, and I don't have, is I haven't stepped into the arena. You have. People, if you haven't gone to the Machian, go to the Machian on YouTube channel. He has some of the greatest interviews with some of the greatest minds in mainstream physics. But you had mentioned, I was sort of shocked, happy and shocked that, my goodness, is it the case that Alexander Unsker is truly saying in one of his books that the majority of physics doesn't really buy all this stuff? Or am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, I mean, that's an effect of sociology of science at the very end. Because, I mean, of course, all these not only extra dimensions on parallel universes are nonsense, but also these hypercharge and gluons and quarks and colors and bosons are really strange stuff for every person with common sense. and physicists are usually common sense people. And so that's my experience that the majority of physicists uh, working in the real stuff, working in the applied sciences, and working in where you have to do real work, they don't really buy all the stuff. But the problem is the following: people don't like to step out and express their dissenting opinion, and so there is, I think, a silent majority who is skeptical, critical, common sense oriented, but they're not the experts. They don't consider themselves the experts in particle physics. So they say, okay, that's not really my interest, but I'm not going to say anything against it because, well, let me do my work in peace, and they don't want to speak out, you know. And so I think there is a silent majority who is skeptical, but doesn't have the proper background to express it, and they say they prefer to talk only about their own specialty and not to speak out against these, in my view, quite patent absurdities. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that's what's interesting to me is I've been working for a couple of decades now trying to get this information out to the general public in different ways. I made my his documentary Einstein Wrong. Again, there was nothing. I didn't go in and say, "Oh, Einstein's a terrible person." I was just saying, "Look, let's take the person who we look at most. He's still a human being. He had amazing ideas. Obviously, he had huge influence, but maybe we need to take a look and see, something about
Yeah,
being
maybe you
critical.
get mad at him for the wrong things. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then we have a YouTube channel which I started. I said, look, I think people are going to come this way because it's sort of like there are ways today to get that voice out there. So you have the movie, and so people, when they watch my channel, I'll give them a free view once in a while of the movie, and they'll go see it, and another idea, it opens their mind up. They start thinking, oh, I'm not alone in those kinds of thoughts. And what I try to do with my YouTube channel, this channel, is do the same. And that's one of the things I think that's going to be great about the Science Woke coming up, is because we're going to be able to turn on even bigger channels, and in ways that are just totally common. Not in bashing modes, in a more of a curious mode, giving a voice to that little voice in the back of all these literally millions and millions of people's head who love science. That, hey, well, yeah, I've thought about that. And not only that, oh, here's Dr. Alexander Unzicker. He's a physicist. He's look at, oh, I'm going to read that Einstein Lost Keys book. This James Maxwell. He's a geologist. He's got books out about Earth, expansion tectonics. Oh, I'll take a look at that. And just general opinions about, like the Higgs fake. I can read that, and all of a sudden they're going to say, wait a minute, there is a group of scientists. Literally, we have catalog. One guy in France has what we call dissidents, people working outside the mainstream. He has over 6,000 people cataloged who are actively doing some good work. They're not just like people, plumbers who say I've got an idea about the universe. So I think it's interesting that I agree with you completely that people are in fact afraid, especially people in physics, to come out and say, hey, this stuff's pretty wacky. Is there anybody out there? Don't we have some different ideas? Because they've got their own reputations to worry about. But I think my hope is that things like this YouTube channel, your books, and now this science magazine, which I think now all of a sudden they're going to have an entire magazine or almost,
Mhm.
and with news channel like what we have, saying, no, you're not crazy. There are some crazy ideas. We need to look in different directions, and here they are. So,
Mhm, mhm, yeah. So let me just since we're talking about the book, The Higgs Fake, let me just be mean a little bit. Yeah,
oh,
because
to me or
I mean,
to not to
we're
me,
talking
right? Not to me.
No, not to you in
Okay.
general.
Okay.
Uh, uh, we're talking about big science, and this particle physics business is big science. So just imagine you build an experiment and detector, and it takes, I don't know, 1 or 2 decades to complete the next apparatus.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
and then well, another decade if you evaluate all the data. So if you are really a smart, young, creative person, is that the way you go? Okay, wait for 20 years and then another decade to develop your creativity? No, definitely not. So I'm saying that this particular field of big science of particle physics attracts the wrong people, not the people
Oh,
really interested, not the really people who are creative, flexible, full of ideas. I think it attracts the exact opposite. And if you look at the biographies of other famous physicists who really found out something, take the Nobel laureate Ted Hensch, who got the Nobel Prize for this work in quantum optics. It's kind of funny because if you listen to these people say, okay, when I was young, I tried to decide which field to take in physics, and I said, well, particle physics, I intuitively felt it wasn't my stuff, yeah, where I'd like to work. So I think this is pretty revealing if you talk to scientists who really discovered something about their motives and why they choose their particular field. And yeah, I think that people should think about that. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting because when I was doing my movie, I was also fascinated by this. In fact, I was trying, and at times I was trying to get psychologists and sociologists. In fact, in 19, oh boy, 2015 at our CMPS conference here in Boca Raton, I succeeded in bringing a sociologist who was looking at people who were outside the mainstream. And I thought to myself, this is such a huge and ample area of that psychology and sociology is just missing, because I agree with you completely. I give this story once in a while, and the story that I tell people when I'm talking about what I do, and people say, "Oh, you got a YouTube channel? You got what's going on there?" And I start talking, and I say, here's the way it works. When you are sitting in class and someone says to you, "Okay, you're going to learn about special relativity," and as you get close to the speed of light, mass increases, time slows down, and length contracts. Now, you are a person who's a critical thinker, and you're really trying to find, like you said, I'm trying to find out what the way the world works. And so if you're more of an engineering type, you're going to go, raise your hand, says, teacher, why? You can say that, and then the teacher comes back to you and says, well, well, that's the way the universe works. You don't ask why. And then at
Mhm.
that point, you have two people. You have the one person who is going to end up as a particle physicist, which is a very small portion, extremely small portion of the population, of human
Well, no, that
population.
could be smaller.
Yeah, yeah, but wait, that's a political comment. That's not a logical one. So I will not. I will ignore that one. But what happens is you have that one person's going to be like this one person who wins the Nobel Prize, and at that point the engineer is going to say, "This is a bunch of baloney. I'm not even going to argue with the guy. I'm just going to take my test." Parrot back what he wants to hear and go on and do something maybe that will be profound in the world. And then you have this other kid, and then he'll be one in a million, which is probably about right, who's going to be a particle physicist, and he basically decides to accept it with not because of a logical or for philosophical or even scientific reasons. He accepts it because he's looking to for of going to a university where he's going to get a name, he's going to have a job. When he goes back to his class reunion, instead of thinking he was a nerd that they picked on when he was little, they say, "I'm an astrophysicist from MIT. Oh my gosh, you must have a super uber brain." And so I think this is just a huge, ample area that psychology and sociology has barely even looked at.
Yeah, 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 that would be definitely a field to study. I mean, I should mention here uh, David Pickering. he wrote an excellent book. It's really a great book about the history of particle physics. It's called Constructing Quarks, and he's a trained particle physicist. Okay, you know that, but
Yes, yes.
he's really a critical, independent thinker, and he just looked at this business for a decade and decided that's crazy. So many contradictions. I mean, if you read this book, it's really fun. And out of desperation, Andrew Pickering, in fact, became a sociologist of science. Of course, I mean, he wouldn't. Nobody would give him a job any longer in a even remotely related to particle physics. So I think he had to change, and he went to sociology of science. The only thing I disagree with him, because I mean he I mean denies reality as a whole and says everything is a social construction. So I'm not
Oh, yeah.
buying.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is a reality out there that we can fortunately still observe, but not in this crazy manner. But his book is really a terrific description of what's going on for decades there.
Yeah, right now I'm holding up to the audience because you can't see this because of the way my recording stuff is. It's a book here. It says "Constructing Quarks," Andrew Pickering, and actually one of my during my live broadcast, I had one of my subscribers said, "Hey, have you read that?" And I goes, "I think I have. I'm not sure." So I went back. The library, everybody sees behind me and sees behind you. It was somewhere else, and I actually found it. So yeah, that's another great read. But I do agree. I'm not into the we're a computer program of some advanced race, junior high school, and or something like that. But okay, I got just another couple of questions before we this little shorter interview that I'm going to guide this one, and then we'll have hopefully one more with you in another interview here. But um, here's a question I have for you, and this comes from my movie. When I was trying to figure out why does big science, big physics, big cosmology, why do they get such immense amounts of funding? And I have arguments with my subscribers, and in my film, I basically said that what happened was when the atomic bomb was dropped, uh, we handed over the keys of the kingdom to physicists, theoretical physicists, right or wrong. And at that point, it became zero game as to what they're really finding, and it had everything to do with world power. And if we build the next particle accelerator and find the God particle, and if that God particle turns out to give us, a world dominance, then that's what it really means. Whereas some of my subscribers will say, well, no, Dave, it's really what's really going on there is no, these politicians really care. They want to unlock the secrets of the universe. And I'm thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding. I mean, politicians, all they care about is, right now, unfortunately, making sure their rich donors and corporations are happy while they destroy the rest of us. But what is your opinion about how is it that so much money is getting thrown at it? Is it in fact in the end driven by this idea of atomic, accelerators eventually will give people some type of physical power, and that governments throw money that way? Or what's your take on that?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not going into everything what is coming to my mind now. Well, I think the key point is that indeed there was a paradigm shift in science um, with the atomic bomb, with World War II, maybe even earlier, and that's where became physics changed from the science of fundamental questions of the true laws of nature. It changed to a high-tech sport, okay, of just
Ah,
building the most powerful accelerator and collecting results. And the earlier generation of physicists, all these deep thinkers, they they were just asking questions about the universe, but nobody in power was really interested. And then you have this discovery of the of nuclear fission that changes the world. I mean, it really changes the power, I mean, physicists handed over their discovery to the military, and there is some tragedy also in this story. But for science, I think it was a quite catastrophic development, you know.
Hmm.
And well, I mean,
So,
in a way, that's a very different paradigm. Either you're after the laws of nature, or you're just doing the most trying to do the most powerful experiment. And of course, these things are interlinked. The change from the earlier science to the big science, then accompanied by this huge funding because physics was important. Who knew about the secrets of physics held the power of the world, and of course everybody tried to finance and to get the money into this research. There are lots of aspects, and we changed from the small groups or even the individual mavericks who discovered something to these large groups, and also sociology. I mean, it's completely a different kind of science. It's I think if you look at the physics of the 1920s and look at the physics of the 1960s, it doesn't deserve the same name. It's really something very different. Yeah.
wow, that's really great. It was a great question, and I got a great answer. I think that I remember reading that in your book too. I think it was in the Einstein's Lost Key. You talk about the technology, also in Bankrupting Physics. I think also you talk about it. It is a big theme, and for certain, it's become a sport, really. And it's almost as absurd as us paying people who can kick a ball around an absurd amount of money when we have what 2/3 of the world on this planet who go to bed hungry, yet we somehow have created a mass media and technological world where those things can happen and everybody thinks that's like, oh yeah, okay, that's normal.
Hmm. Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, there are lots of perversions in this world. I mean, we, we bail out the banks for trillions of dollars, and part
Yeah,
of kind is starving, and that's a lot of absurdity.
sure.
Um, but from a very general point of view, what bothers me is. Uh, at the very end, civilization is dependent on science and technology. That's how we advanced. That's
Sure.
how we became humans. How we progress. And that definitely will decide our destiny on this planet.
Sure.
And the situation we have today is that our greatest minds, so to speak, physicists and mathematicians, they are completely on the wrong track, and they're heralding a model which is, if you take a sober look, it's absurd and complicated, and obviously not reflecting anything fundamental. So what bothers me is we have a stall in progress. Yeah, we have all the intellectual power. Um, well, stuck in a dead end, and I think on the long run, this can become a problem for humankind. Yeah,
Well, yeah, I think it can, and I think
yeah.
the good thing is
I,
is that
I shall
go ahead.
I shall add something. I mean, I think one of the most interesting developments in science um, is now artificial intelligence. And recently, I had the opportunity to talk briefly to Demis Hassabis, the founder of Google DeepMind, and I asked the question and said, "Well, um, don't you think that this artificial intelligence or this deep network learning that could have potentially an impact for science, so to speak, discovering the true laws of nature from raw data or something?" And then to my surprise, he answered. That was his motivation to go into this business of artificial intelligence, because he said that when he was young, Demis Hassabis said he read one of the books um, by Steven Weinberg, Dreams of a Final Theory, and he said literally, well, all these smart Nobel winning guys, they didn't really find out something very convincing. I think we need uh, some more intellectual horsepower to solve these deep problems of physics, and that's why he took this way to develop artificial intelligence for the sake of finding out the laws of physics. That was a surprise to me, and well, I don't know what the future brings, but it could even turn out that we humans don't do it by the conventional way. At the moment, it looks very, very sad, but maybe we will need some help in finding out the true laws of nature. I don't know.
Oh no, I remember. I didn't. Do you have a video online about that? I think you do, don't you? On your channel about the artificial intelligence?
I briefly touched in. I gave a talk on the meeting last year in the physics and artificial intelligence, and I
Hmm.
think this might become a hot topic. I mean, well, I could say as I become older, you always think how much realistically will you find out in your lifetime. It's a continuous struggle to to dedicate your time to the right things, and I think this could be a hot topic. Uh, finding out the smart way to deal with the raw data, and I think it's interesting in principle. We may
Yep.
be still far from getting really good results, but I think it's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know this. This may be a shock to you, but my real job, I work at LexisNexis in the HPP systems, which is a supercomputer. One of the people there is his name is Roger Dev. I just talked to him today because my area is supercomputers and human language. But the machine learning, basically, machine learning isn't. I mean, they call it AI, but what really is, and it's still fantastic. I don't call it so much AI as I do. I call it
Mhm.
incredible amount of computing power that humans could never do in a million lifetimes. Is you have an incredible amount of data, and you run algorithms, whether they're neural nets, whether they're statistical, there's different ways
That
that
makes
do.
a difference, however. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And basically what you have in these particle accelerators are amazing, a ridiculous amount of data and a ridiculous amount of paths that people are arbitrarily putting these rules on to arbitrarily find arbitrary packages with arbitrary attributes, as you say. And then what you have is you have really the ability, if we were to take that and we also have in machine learning, visual machine learning, that is, you can give it and say, what are the patterns? If these are paths, we'll give them patterns and say, what are you finding? What are the patterns that you see? And they could end up finding, because they can look at, instead of cherry picking what they want to with a predisposition that I'm going to find the Higgs,
Exactly.
they
Hmm.
what you'll find is say let it go at it. So I'm all in. Maybe we need to make a project out of this because our HPP systems actually run on regular computers.
Yeah.
The machine learning is there and they're open source, so we can
Mhm.
run this in open source. So I think there's a project we have definitely have to try out. What do you think?
Mhm. That's a good point. I mean, I've heard Demis Hassabis even once gave a talk at CERN. I don't know what he thinks about this business, but as a matter of fact, I mean, if you try to apply deep learning to particle physics data, I mean, as a consequence, you would have to throw away the Large Hadron Collider because it produces way too much data. They can't handle all the data, and their excuse is, "Oh, we can't handle all these data. We have to separate. We have to take cherry picking the important parts and throw away 99.99% of their data." That's absurd. That's completely
Sure.
crazy.
No, and
And
yeah,
as you said, based on their preconceptions about what's important, but a truly intelligent computer system based on deep learning would need the entire data,
absolutely,
and that would
absolutely.
need that would mean that uh, a collider such as Daisy 30, 40 years ago would be perfect for deep learning. Okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
don't need all these huge particle accelerators. And I think a deep learning system in the future will understand more about the fundamentals of particle physics with 50-year-old data from, say, Daisy, or even earlier, or Brookhaven or something like that,
sure, sure.
than these guys from CERN with their Large Hadron Collider. Yeah,
Well,
because they throw away all the data. It's
yeah, I think what's interesting is the way this would work is that you take all this data, you then say, okay, what we do know are paths, and you can then give it the paths and let it find patterns that we couldn't see. And then at that point, it's not going to be able to necessarily interpret what it means physically. But what we would have in front of us, all the creative minds that are actually, instead of dictating what it is, they'd all of a sudden have patterns that were definitely there, statistically significant, instead of which we have, which is completely different, is the exact opposite, which Dr. Carazani always told me, which was low level, low number statistics, which is an oxymoron, right? I mean, and what we would then have is the amazing a book in front of us to say, the computer's not going to tell us what it means, but it's going to give us patterns we never saw that we cannot statistically neglect. We would have to answer to, and who knows where that would come out of that. So we're
Mhm.
on for that. So I was going to ask you another question, but we're pretty much done for this interview because we could go on forever. But I want to thank you so much. Again, my guest is Dr. Alexander Unsker. He's a physicist, author, science writer. He has been, like I said, he's agreed to be part of our new magazine, our sciencewoke.org. If you haven't read his books, they're must read. The Higgs Fake, read that one first. Bankrupting Physics. That's no, Constructing Quarks. Where did I put it? Oh, it fell down. But Bankrupting Physics is also what you want to read, and also his latest book, The Einstein Lost Keys, which is just a really amazing, eye-opening book. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra Unsker. I really appreciate you being here today.
Okay, thank you so much, David, for providing this opportunity. Thanks.
No, no problem. And remember, folks, stay critical, stay thinking. I'm Dave D. Hilster, your science therapist, trying to get you to become science woke. And as I promised, interview with the none other, the infamous, famous Dr. Alexander Unsker. Ciao for now.